My name is Randal Pinkett. I'm the co-author of Black Faces in White Places, where I interviewed dozens of African Americans on their experiences in predominantly white professional circles. I'm also the chairman and CEO of BCT Partners, a company whose mission is to provide insights about diverse people that lead to equity. Because of our decades of experience at BCT Partners, I've had the honor and the privilege of facilitating various town halls, forums, listen and learns with corporations, nonprofit organizations, academic institutions, and audiences ranging from 8 people to over 800 people. I've heard the honest, raw emotions of employees. I've sat down with executives and managers and leaders and global CEOs as they've prepared to enter into courageous conversations. And I've been inspired by NFL star Emmanuel Acho's uncomfortable conversations with a black man. So you can consider this a candid conversation with a black businessman. As we are deep in this moment of civil unrest, this video is my message to other business professionals as a black business professional, and in particular, white professionals. This is my message to individual contributors, managers, leaders, and executives as you wrestle with the question, where do we go from here? Now that you've released your statement, you've held your town hall, you've espoused your commitment to racial equity, I want to offer my insights, my recommendations, and my observations, not only from my experience, but also from what I've heard from the nearly 1,000 people with whom I've been in dialogue over the past few weeks. And so I want to frame this conversation by dispelling the 7 most common myths that I've heard across those many dialogues. Myth number 1, and I've primarily heard this myth in my private conversations with white professionals, less so in large groups. And that myth is that it's better to remain silent out of fear of being labeled a racist or being judged or being attacked than it is to speak out in this moment. And my response to that is you must find your voice, you must speak out in this time. Dr. King once said that we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Don't be the silent friend. Find your voice. Educate yourself on the basic language of racial equity. Non-racist versus anti-racist, white privilege and white fragility, the differences between diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. And in doing so, find your voice. And you can decide how much of your voice you want to be heard, but you can't remain silent in this moment. Do not let fear paralyze you. Myth number 2, white privilege doesn't exist. And I have not heard this myth directly from people, but I've heard it from people who tell me they've heard it from other people. Let's define what we mean by white privilege. Think about the analogy of a fish swimming in a stream. If you're a white person, the stream is working for you. Not to say you're not working hard, not to say you're not experiencing challenges, but rather to say the fish in the stream, it's easier for them because they're moving in the direction of the stream. For black people, the stream is working against us. Not to say we aren't working hard like you, not to say we don't have our own challenges like you, but rather the stream is making it harder for us to swim. And so privilege gives unearned advantages and disadvantages to certain groups. And to the extent that you are white, male, Christian, straight, and able-bodied, you are quintupling down on privilege. And so acknowledging privilege means not just owning the advantage it may give us, but also helping those who are disadvantaged, which means mentorship, sponsorship, advocacy for black people, both when they're in the room and when they're not in the room. It could mean going as far as Alexis Ohanian, who co-founded Reddit and stepped down from the board to make room for another black person, for a black person to join the board. You must look at the entire life cycle of your organization, from recruitment to hiring to retention to advancement to development to support, to identify where is advantage and disadvantage playing out so you can root out those inequities. Myth number 3, if I focus my company's efforts on black people in America, it is to the exclusion of other groups. I found this myth to be most challenging for global leaders and global CEOs where race can play out very differently in contexts across the globe. My response is focusing on black people in America or black people in other groups is not an either or, it's an and. We can do both. Black people are the canary in the coal mine. We are hit earlier and hit harder than other groups. Think of the analogy of ramps for persons with disabilities. By focusing specifically on persons with disabilities, ramps end up helping everyone. They help parents with strollers, they help children, they help cyclists. By focusing on Black people, the most oppressed group, you are helping all groups. This is very similar to John Powell's concept of targeted universalism, where we can develop very universal goals with very targeted strategies. Myth number 4, the source of the problem is racist community policing. Let's be clear. Racist community policing is a symptom, not a source. The source of the problem is racism. And the symptoms of the source play out in many other contexts, not just community policing. We see it in the lack of representation at the leadership and executive levels of corporations, nonprofit organizations, academic institutions. For example, there are 4 African American CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations, and they're all men. That is a symptom. You must be leaders in not just identifying these issues, but shifting employee behavior and shifting and transforming organizational culture from being non-racist to being anti-racist, which means not being passive or even neutral on matters of racism, but actively seeking to dismantle racism, because that's what it means to be an anti-racist. Myth number 5, individuals are the problem. The Derek Chauvins of the world, the Garrett Rolfes of the world, they're the problem. No, individuals are not the problem. Racist policies, racist laws, racist cultures, racist systems, that's the problem. You see, racism exists across 4 dimensions. Personal racism, your beliefs. Interpersonal racism, your behaviors. Institutional racism, which reflects your organization's culture. And then structural racism, which reflects our society. We cannot reduce the problem to individuals, because if we do so, we ignore the complexities of race and we obscure the 4 dimensions of racism. You as leaders, as managers, as CEOs, you have an opportunity to dismantle racism across all 4 of these dimensions. Myth number 6, a plan that supports Black issues but does not support Black businesses is a good and complete plan. That is not a good and complete plan. Supporting Black issues addresses the social components of the problem, but it ignores the economics of the problem. Yes, you must support and focus on workforce diversity and workplace diversity, but you must also focus on supplier diversity, which means diversifying the suppliers, the businesses, the companies with whom you conduct business. Most companies don't have supplier diversity programs. And even for those that do, the percent of dollars they spend on Black businesses is in the single digits. So this is your moment, this is your opportunity, not just to support Black issues, but also to support Black businesses. Myth number 7 is the myth that I hear most often, and I've heard most often in the dialogues I've facilitated. And that is that being colorblind is the gold standard. That to say I don't see color is saying something good. And that is a myth, because it leads you down a road of believing that your workplace is somehow a meritocracy, that your organization only hires the best and brightest, and nobody sees color. Well, I got news for you. Look at the data. The data suggests that Blacks are underrepresented at many levels, especially on boards and in the C-suite. I want you to see color. I want you to see my color. And I want you to not be colorblind, but in the words of Melody Hobson, color brave, which means having bold conversations about race. But above all, seeing color, but not treating people unfairly. My advice is to build your cultural competence in this moment, and that means 4 things. It means increasing your cultural awareness, building your cultural knowledge, enhancing your cultural skills, and expanding your cultural encounters, because that not just makes you a better professional, but it makes you a better person. So those are the 7 myths. The 7 most common myths I've heard across the many dialogues I've been blessed to be a part of. But I'm going to give you one final bonus myth. And that myth is the following: that discomfort in this moment is a bad thing. Discomfort is not a bad thing. Discomfort isn't even a good thing. It's a great thing. Now, why would I say that? Because discomfort and growth must coexist. You can't have one without the other. And so I want you to lean into that discomfort, because if you lean into it, it means you're growing, and hopefully growing into a better person today than you were yesterday. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you want to transform your organization to being more diverse, more inclusive, more equitable, then it begins with you. It begins with you. Releasing a statement may have been hard. Doing the work is going to be even harder. It's going to be messy. So let's transform this moment into a movement so we are never in this moment again. And we can do this. We will do this together.